I am Josefina Martinez, 67 years old, and I never thought my own children would betray me this way. After my husband Frank died, I worked 3 jobs to give Catherine, Michael, and Amanda everything they needed. So when Amanda sent me a wedding invitation, I was overjoyed to help plan and pay for it. Then came the call that shattered my heart. I was uninvited at Catherine's insistence, but they still expected my money. What happened next shocked us all. Let me know where you are watching from, and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself in family relationships. I grew up in San Diego, the daughter of hardworking immigrants who came to America with nothing but hope in their hearts. My father worked in construction, while my mother cleaned houses, both of them determined to give me opportunities they never had. They taught me the value of family hard work and dignity. These values shaped everything I would become. I met Frank Martinez during my second year of community college. He was studying business and working nights at his uncle's restaurant. Frank had the warmest smile and the kindest heart of anyone I had ever met. We fell in love quickly, and after 2 years of dating, we married in a small ceremony surrounded by our families. Those were the happiest days of my life. Our marriage blessed us with 28 wonderful years together. We built a modest but comfortable life, raising our 3 children in a home filled with love, laughter, and sometimes challenges, but always respect. Catherine, our oldest, was born when we were both 25. She was always the serious one, incredibly smart, but also strong-willed from the moment she could speak. Michael came 2 years later, our quiet middle child, with a talent for fixing anything mechanical. Then Amanda, our baby, arrived when I was 30. She was our sunshine child, always smiling, always eager to please everyone around her. Frank worked his way up to becoming a manager at a local manufacturing company, while I balanced part-time administrative work with raising our children. We weren't wealthy, but we had enough. Frank always said, "Family is the only wealth that matters," and I believed him with all my heart. Then tragedy struck when Frank had a sudden heart attack at work. He was only 53 years old. Our children were 17, 15, and 12 at the time. The world, as I knew it, collapsed that day. Not only had I lost my soulmate, but I was now solely responsible for 3 grieving children who still needed so much from me. The insurance money helped for a while, but it wasn't enough for the long term. I took on multiple jobs, working as an administrative assistant during the day and cleaning offices at night. On weekends, I would help cater events for extra money. The exhaustion was overwhelming, but what choice did I have? My children needed to finish school, needed clothes, needed food, needed a mother who could somehow fill the gaping hole their father had left. Catherine was already in her senior year of high school when Frank died. She had always been academically gifted, and despite our financial struggles, I was determined she would go to college. I remember the night we sat at our kitchen table, a pile of scholarship applications spread out before us. "Mom, we can't afford this," she said, but I wouldn't hear it. "Your father wanted this for you," I told her. "We will find a way." And we did. Catherine received a partial scholarship to study pre-law, and I took out loans to cover the rest. It meant more years of financial strain for me, but seeing her walk across that stage at graduation made every sacrifice worthwhile. Michael was different. After high school, he wanted to work rather than continue his education. I insisted he at least try community college. "Just 1 year," I begged him. "If you still want to work after that, I won't stop you." That 1 year turned into an associate degree in engineering technology, which eventually led to a stable career. It wasn't the 4-year degree I had hoped for him, but he found his path. Amanda, my youngest, watched her siblings and chose her own way. She wanted to become a teacher, inspired by the woman who had helped her through the difficult years after her father died. I worked extra shifts and dipped into what little savings remained to help her achieve this dream. Through all those years, I rarely bought new clothes for myself. I skipped doctor appointments to save money. I sold my wedding ring to pay for Michael's first car so he could get to his classes and part-time job. I lived on coffee and whatever was left on my children's plates. But I never complained. They were my world, my reason for pushing forward. As they grew into adults and started their own lives, I felt a mixture of pride and loss. My daily purpose had been providing for them, and suddenly they didn't need me in the same way anymore. Catherine married Thomas, a fellow lawyer from a wealthy family. Michael found Diane a kind woman who worked in healthcare. Amanda, my baby, took longer to find her path in love, dating several unsuitable men before meeting Brian, a middle school science teacher like herself. I finally retired at 65, living modestly on Social Security and the small amount I had managed to save. Frank's life insurance had long since been spent on raising our children, but I had no regrets. I had a small 2-bedroom house that was paid off a garden I tended with care, and the satisfaction of seeing my children established in their lives. What I didn't fully recognize until later was how the family dynamic had shifted over the years. Catherine, always the strongest personality, had gradually taken more control over family decisions. Her financial success gave her a certain authority that neither Michael nor Amanda seemed willing to challenge. I noticed it in small ways at first, how holiday gatherings moved from my home to hers, how my suggestions were politely acknowledged, then ignored, how conversations would sometimes pause when I entered a room. I told myself it was natural for children to establish their own lives and relationships with each other as adults. Perhaps I was being overly sensitive. After all, they still visited me, still called on birthdays, and Mother's Day still included me in major life events. Or so I thought until Amanda's wedding changed everything. Amanda and Brian had been dating for 3 years when he proposed during a summer vacation to the Grand Canyon. She called me immediately, her voice bubbling with excitement, as she described how he had gotten down on one knee at sunrise, the vast canyon stretching out behind them. "Mom, it was perfect," she gushed, "just like something from a movie." I was thrilled for her. Amanda had always been my sensitive child, the one who wore her heart on her sleeve, and I had worried about her through previous relationships that had left her heartbroken. Brian seemed different, solid, respectful, and genuinely in love with my daughter. When they came to visit me the following weekend to show off the engagement ring, a modest but lovely diamond, I hugged them both with tears in my eyes. "I want to help with the wedding," I told Amanda. "I've been saving for this day since you were a little girl." This wasn't entirely true. I had set aside some money, yes, but much of it had gone to more pressing needs over the years. Still, I had $25,000 in a special account money I had been carefully accumulating since my retirement by cutting corners in my own life. I had always imagined contributing to my children's weddings, especially my youngest daughter's. Amanda's eyes filled with tears when I told her about the money. "Mom, that's too much," she protested, but I could see the relief on her face. She and Brian were both teachers with student loans still to pay off. A wedding would strain their finances considerably. "I want to do this," I insisted. "Your father would have wanted it too." The initial planning was joyful. Amanda and I went shopping for wedding magazines, spending a Saturday afternoon at my kitchen table, flipping through pages of dresses and floral arrangements, laughing and dreaming together. She wanted a spring wedding, something elegant, but not overly formal. "Nothing too stuffy," she said. "We want people to have fun." We even went shopping for mother of the bride dresses. something I had looked forward to for years. I tried on a lovely pale blue gown that Amanda said brought out the color of my eyes. "You look beautiful, Mom," she said. And for a moment, I felt beautiful. It had been a long time since I had bought something special just for myself. The first signs of trouble came about 3 weeks into the planning. Catherine called me one evening. "Mom, I think we need to coordinate about Amanda's wedding," she said. There was something in her tone that immediately put me on edge, her handling voice, as I had come to think of it. "What do you mean coordinate?" I asked. "Amanda and I have been looking at venues and caterers." "Yes. Well," Catherine paused. "Amanda mentioned that to me, and I'm concerned you might be steering her toward options that are a bit dated. Thomas and I want to help make sure this wedding is appropriate for the social circles they'll be moving in as educators." I felt a flicker of irritation. Amanda and Brian should have the wedding they want, not what's appropriate for anyone's social circle. Of course, Catherine said smoothly, but they're young and might not understand all the considerations. Anyway, I've set up a meeting with a wedding planner I know. She's excellent and gives my law firm a professional discount. I've already told Amanda about it. That was the beginning of Catherine's takeover. The wedding planner, Judith, was polished and efficient, and clearly used to working with clients like Catherine. Suddenly, there were discussions about letterpress invitations, 5-course dinners, and a venue that cost nearly twice what Amanda and Brian had initially budgeted. "I thought you wanted something simple," I said to Amanda, after one particularly overwhelming planning session. "This is simple, Mom," she replied, not meeting my eyes. "Just elegant, simple. Catherine says this is how modern weddings are done." I tried to voice my concerns about the escalating costs, but Catherine always had an answer. "Mom's contribution is so generous," she would say, "but Thomas and I will cover any overages. We want this to be special." Yet somehow more and more expenses seemed to be directed to my account rather than hers. Michael remained largely absent from these discussions. When I called him concerned about the direction things were taking, he sighed. "You know how Catherine gets Mom. Just let her do her thing. It's easier that way." "But it's not her wedding," I protested. "Try telling her," that he muttered, then quickly changed the subject. As the weeks passed, I noticed I was being invited to fewer planning meetings. Amanda's calls became less frequent, and when we did speak, she seemed distracted, often saying she needed to check with Catherine before confirming any details with me. Once I arrived for what I thought was a scheduled tasting with the caterer, only to discover the meeting had been moved to the following day. "Didn't Catherine tell you?" the caterer asked, looking uncomfortable. "She called yesterday to reschedule." No, Catherine hadn't told me. I began seeing photos on social media of shopping trips and venue visits that I hadn't been invited to. There was Amanda trying on a different dress than the ones we had looked at together. There was Catherine, with the wedding planner, examining floral arrangements. There was even Michael and his wife Diane included in a cake tasting that I had specifically asked to be part of. When I called Amanda to ask why I hadn't been included, she sounded flustered. "Oh, that was just a last-minute thing, Mom. Catherine was in the area for work and thought we should just check it out quickly. It wasn't a real appointment." But the post had clearly mentioned making a final decision on the cake flavor. I tried to tell myself not to be hurt, that the wedding was still 4 months away, and there would be plenty of other opportunities for me to be involved. I reminded myself that Catherine had always been the organizer, the one who took charge. Perhaps she was just trying to help her younger sister navigate the stressful process of planning a wedding. Still, a sense of unease grew within me. One evening, I drove past Catherine's house and saw Amanda's car in the driveway. Lights blazed from the dining room, where I could make out several figures seated around the table. I recognized the wedding planner's distinctive red hair, another planning meeting I hadn't been told about. I didn't stop. I drove home with tears stinging my eyes, wondering what I had done wrong, why I was being slowly pushed out of my own daughter's wedding preparations. The $25,000 I had promised was already mostly spent, with new expenses being added regularly. Yet my input, my presence, seemed increasingly unwelcome. I called my sister Teresa that night, my voice shaking as I described what was happening. "Have you talked to Amanda directly?" she asked. Really sat her down and asked what's going on. "I've tried," I said. "She always has some excuse or says I'm imagining things." "Josephina," my sister said gently, "you need to be direct. This is your daughter and your money they're spending. You have every right to be included." I promised I would speak to Amanda the next day. I rehearsed what I would say, practicing a tone that was firm but loving. I would not accuse. I would not get emotional. I would simply express my desire to be more involved in this important event. But before I could make that call, Amanda called me. Her voice sounded strange, tight, and formal, in a way that was completely unlike my normally warm daughter. "Mom," she said, "we need to talk about the wedding." That phone call changed everything. I remember exactly where I was standing in my kitchen, watering the small herb garden I keep on the windowsill. It was a Tuesday afternoon, just past 2 o'clock. Outside, the mail carrier was making his rounds, and the neighbor's dog was barking at a squirrel in the oak tree. Such ordinary moments before my world turned upside down. Mom Amanda said again, her voice unnaturally high-pitched, "There's something I need to discuss with you about the wedding." I set down my watering can, a sense of dread already building inside me. "What is it, honey?" There was a long pause, then she said in a rush, "We've had to make some changes to the guest list." Oh, I kept my tone light. "Is the venue too small for everyone you want to invite?" "No, it's not that." Another pause. "The thing is, we've decided it would be best if you didn't attend the actual ceremony and reception." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had to grip the edge of the sink to steady myself. "What did you say?" I asked, certain I had misheard. "I'm sorry, Mom." Her voice cracked slightly. "We think it would be better this way. The venue is very upscale, and Catherine thinks, we all think, it might not be the right environment for you." "Not the right environment," I repeated numbly. "Amanda, I'm your mother. What are you talking about?" What followed was possibly the most painful conversation of my life, worse even than the doctor's explanation of why they couldn't save Frank. My own daughter, my baby, awkwardly explained that they were concerned I would feel out of place among the guests, many of whom were colleagues of Thomas or friends from their country club. "Catherine says you might be uncomfortable," Amanda continued, sounding like she was reading from a script, "and we wouldn't want you to feel awkward or embarrassed." Embarrassed? Why would I be embarrassed at my own daughter's wedding? Then came the truth, each word like a knife to my heart. Catherine had convinced Amanda that I would embarrass them with my dated appearance and immigrant mannerisms, even though I was born in this country. Apparently, my accent sometimes became more pronounced when I was nervous. My clothes weren't stylish enough. My stories about their childhood might not appeal to the sophisticated crowd that would be attending. "But we still want you involved," Amanda added quickly. "You can come to the rehearsal dinner. It's much smaller, just immediate family." I couldn't speak. Tears streamed down my face as I stood alone in my kitchen, clutching my phone, listening to my youngest child explain why I wasn't good enough to attend her wedding. Mom, are you there? The money I finally managed to say. The $25,000 I've already contributed. Oh, that's all been paid to vendors already, she said, sounding relieved to change the subject slightly. But we really appreciate it. It's made such a difference. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for hours, trying to make sense of what had happened. How had my children come to view me this way? When had I become someone to be ashamed of, rather than the mother who had sacrificed everything for them? That evening, my phone dinged with a text message from Michael Hurd. You talked to Amanda. This is for the best, Mom. You wouldn't enjoy this kind of event anyway. Too stuffy for you. Not even a phone call. A text message to tell me he supported excluding me from his sister's wedding. I couldn't sleep that night. I paced my small house looking at the family photos on my walls. Catherine graduating from law school, me standing proudly beside her despite the second-hand dress I wore because I couldn't afford a new one after paying her final tuition bill, Michael holding up his technical certification, my arm around his shoulders. Amanda as a teenager, both of us laughing as we baked cookies in this very kitchen. Had they always been embarrassed by me? Had they smiled for these photos while inwardly cringing at their unfashionable, accented mother? The thought was unbearable. The next morning, still reeling from shock, I logged onto Facebook, something I rarely did, to see if there was any mention of the wedding plans. There was. Amanda had posted photos of herself with Catherine at a final dress fitting. Can't believe the big day is almost here, she had written. So grateful to my amazing sister for making this dream wedding possible. No mention of me or my contribution. Comments from friends all praised Catherine's generosity and taste. Reading through them, it became clear that most people believed Catherine and Thomas were paying for the entire event. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A comment from Thomas's mother, looking forward to sitting at the family table with you all, so honored to be included. Thomas's parents, who had contributed nothing to the wedding, were being given the place that should have been mine. They were taking my seat at my daughter's wedding while I sat at home alone. More discoveries followed, each more painful than the last. Through social media posts and conversations with mutual friends, I learned that Catherine had told everyone I had health issues that prevented me from attending the ceremony. I learned that they had added several of Thomas's business associates to the guest list after eliminating me. I learned that the wedding planner was now dealing exclusively with Catherine, who had apparently taken complete control of all decisions. My neighbor Eliza brought over a casserole that Friday, concern evident in her eyes. I ran into Michael's wife at the grocery store, she said carefully. She mentioned you wouldn't be at Amanda's wedding. I thought you might need some company. I broke down then, sobbing as I told her everything. Eliza, bless her heart, just held my hand and listened. That's not right, Josephina, she said firmly when I had finished. After everything you've done for those children, it's just not right. What should I do? I asked her, feeling completely lost. If it were me, she said after a thoughtful pause, I'd go anyway, show up looking fabulous, and see what they do. I considered it briefly, the thought of walking into that venue dressed in my finest head held high, but the humiliation of potentially being turned away, of causing a scene at my daughter's wedding, was too much to bear. I couldn't do that to Amanda, regardless of how she had hurt me. I think I just need to accept it, I told Eliza, for Amanda's sake. But acceptance became harder the next day when I checked my email and found a message from Judith, the wedding planner. It wasn't addressed to me. It had clearly been sent to me by mistake. It detailed additional expenses that would be charged to my account, including upgraded linens and premium liquor for the open bar, totaling nearly $4,000 more than what had been agreed upon. They were not only excluding me from the wedding, I was still expected to pay for increasingly extravagant additions that I hadn't approved or even been consulted about. For the first time since that devastating phone call, I felt something other than hurt. I felt anger. The email from the wedding planner was the first spark of indignation in what had been a fog of pain and confusion. I printed it out, my hands shaking slightly, as I read through the itemized list of new expenses I was apparently expected to cover. $4,000 of additions to a wedding I wasn't even allowed to attend. I decided I needed to speak with Amanda directly, face to face, rather than over the phone where my words could be dismissed or misinterpreted. The next morning I drove to her apartment, rehearsing what I would say. I wasn't angry, I told myself. I just wanted clarity and honesty. But when I arrived and knocked on her door, it wasn't Amanda who answered. It was Catherine. "Mom," she said, clearly surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I came to speak with Amanda," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is she home?" Catherine stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind her. "She's getting ready for a dress alteration appointment. Now isn't a good time. This will only take a few minutes. It's important." "If this is about the wedding, we've already made our decision." Catherine's tone was cold, dismissive. "Amanda was very upset after your conversation. She doesn't need you making her feel guilty right before her big day." "Making her feel guilty," I repeated incredulously. "She uninvited me from her wedding, and you're concerned about her feelings." "See, this is exactly why we made this decision." Catherine crossed her arms. "You always make everything about you. This wedding is about Amanda and Brian, not about your feelings being hurt because the event is too sophisticated for you." I took a step back, stung by her words. "Too sophisticated, Catherine, I raised you. I worked 3 jobs after your father died to make sure you could go to college. I went without, so you wouldn't have to. And now I'm not good enough to attend my own daughter's wedding." Something flickered in Catherine's eyes, annoyance mixed with something else. "You did what any parent would do," she said. "And yes, we're grateful you kept a roof over our heads and food on the table. But let's not pretend it was more than that. Your parenting was barely adequate, Mom. You were always working, always tired, always telling us how hard everything was for you." Her words left me breathless. "I was working to support you," I managed to say, "to give you opportunities." "And now we have those opportunities," she shot back. "We've moved beyond where we started. Amanda has a chance to connect with people who can help her career, help Brian's career. Having you there talking about the old days, using your outdated expressions, wearing something from a department store, it would change how people see her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So I'm an embarrassment to you all now. Is that it?" Catherine sighed impatiently. "You're taking this too personally. It's a strategic decision. It's my daughter's wedding. And it's my sister's future. I've always had to look out for this family ever since Dad died. You were never enough, Mom. I had to grow up too fast, take care of Amanda and Michael, make sure we all had what we needed because you were always just barely keeping it together." The cruelty of her words stunned me. Had she always felt this way? Had I truly failed them so completely that my oldest daughter saw me as nothing more than a barely adequate provider? "I need to speak to Amanda," I said finally. "She doesn't want to see you right now. Give her space, Mom. Come to the rehearsal dinner if you must sit quietly and don't make a scene. That's the best thing you can do for her at this point." With that, she turned and went back inside, closing the door firmly in my face. I stood there for several moments, too shocked to move, before slowly walking back to my car. The situation deteriorated further over the next few days. My cousin Maria called, her voice tight with disapproval. "Josephina, what's this? I hear about you refusing to attend Amanda's wedding," Catherine says. "You're making excuses because you don't approve of Brian." What, I was stunned. "That's not true at all. They uninvited me, Maria. Catherine decided I'm not sophisticated enough to attend." There was a pause. "That can't be right," Maria said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "Why would they do that?" "Ask them," I said bitterly. Apparently I have too much of an accent and might wear the wrong clothes. "Oh," Josephina, Maria sighed. "There must be some misunderstanding. Catherine said you've been difficult about the wedding plans from the start, trying to control everything." I realized then that Catherine had been systematically turning family members against me, crafting a narrative where I was the problem. How many others had she spoken to? How many believed her version of events? Social media became a source of constant pain. Michael's wife Diane posted pictures almost daily of wedding preparations. She was involved in arrangements I should have been helping with. There were bridal shower photos where Thomas's mother sat in a place of honor while I hadn't even been invited. There were updates about the rehearsal dinner that Catherine was now apparently hosting at an exclusive restaurant. The final straw came a week before the wedding. I had gone to a small cafe near my house for lunch, seeking some distraction from my misery. I was waiting for my order when I heard a familiar voice from a nearby table. Catherine was there having lunch with two women I didn't recognize. "The wedding is going to be perfect now," she was saying, not noticing me several tables away. I honestly had to step in and take over completely. My mother was trying to turn it into something from the 1980s. You know how older people get stuck in their era. Amanda was too nice to say anything, but she was so stressed about it. "That must have been difficult to handle," one of the women commented. It was Catherine sighed dramatically. "But that's what big sisters are for, right?" I told Amanda. "This is your day, not Mom's. You don't have to carry her emotional baggage down the aisle with you." Once we limited Mom's involvement to just financial contribution, everything went much more smoothly. I left before my food arrived, unable to bear hearing more. Catherine wasn't just excluding me. She was actively rewriting our family history, casting herself as the savior and me as a burden to be managed. And she was using my money to do it. When I got home, there was another email from the wedding planner. This one was actually addressed to me, requesting approval for yet another additional expense. A specialty champagne for the toast that would add another $800 to the bill. That was the moment something broke inside me. All these years I had defined myself as a mother, had measured my worth by what I gave my children. I had accepted their gradually increasing distance as a natural part of them building their own lives. I had told myself that their happiness was all that mattered. But this wasn't about their happiness. This was about shame. They were ashamed of me, of my accent, my clothes, my mannerisms, the very things that made me who I was. And while they might be embarrassed to have me at the wedding, they weren't too embarrassed to spend my money. For the first time in my adult life, I felt a clarity that wasn't clouded by maternal sacrifice. I had raised my children to be kind, respectful adults. Somewhere along the way, under Catherine's influence, they had become people who could treat their mother with such calculated cruelty. And I had a decision to make. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in my living room until dawn, looking through old photo albums and thinking about the paths that had led us here. I remembered Catherine as a little girl, fiercely protective of her siblings, already showing the strong will that would define her as an adult. I remembered Michael's quiet kindness, how he would bring me dandelions he'd picked from the yard when I came home exhausted from work. And Amanda's sweet Amanda, who would crawl into my lap even as a teenager when she was sad or worried. Where had those children gone? How had we arrived at this point where they could exclude me so coldly while still expecting my financial support? As the sun rose, I called my oldest friend Dolores. We had known each other for over 40 years, since we both worked as young secretaries at the same company before either of us was married. "They did what Dolores exclaimed when I explained the situation. Unlike my family members who had heard Catherine's version first, Dolores had no trouble believing me. "Josefina, that is beyond disrespectful. It's cruel." "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "Part of me wants to just let it go for Amanda's sake. Pay the extra expenses, attend the rehearsal dinner quietly like Catherine said, and not make trouble." "And what message would that send?" Dolores asked sharply. "That they can treat you like an ATM machine but not a mother. That your feelings don't matter. That you're exactly what Catherine described, a barely adequate presence in their lives." Put like that, the answer seemed clearer. But what can I do now? The wedding is in 2 weeks. All the major expenses have been paid. "Have you checked your accounts recently?" Dolores asked. "You mentioned additional charges they're planning." I hadn't, I realized. I pulled up my banking app while still on the phone with Dolores. What I saw made my breath catch. There were several pending charges from vendors. I didn't recognize names for additional floral arrangements, something from a specialty linen company, and a substantial pending charge from the liquor distributor for the venue. They've added over $5,000 in new expenses just in the last week, I told Dolores, my voice shaking. Expenses I never approved. "Josefina," Dolores said firmly, "this isn't just disrespect anymore. They're taking advantage of you financially. You need to talk to your bank immediately." After hanging up, I made 3 important calls. The first was to my bank, where I spoke with a customer service representative about the pending charges and my options for disputing them. The second was to my financial advisor, a kind man named Robert, who had helped me organize my modest retirement funds after Frank died. The third was to a lawyer, someone Robert recommended who specialized in family law and financial issues. By the end of the day, I had taken decisive action. I canceled all the credit cards that my children were authorized to use. I removed their access to my accounts. I formally rescinded, in writing, any offers of additional funds for the wedding beyond what had already been paid. The pending charges were disputed and ultimately declined by my bank. But the hardest part was yet to come. After consulting with both Robert and the lawyer, I made the difficult decision to amend my will and estate planning documents. This wasn't about revenge. I still intended to leave my children equal shares of whatever modest assets I had when I passed. But I removed them as executors and medical decision-makers, replacing them with my sister Teresa, who had always stood by me. And I added conditions to protect myself from any future financial exploitation. I also blocked their phone numbers, but only temporarily. I knew Catherine would call immediately when the charges were declined, and I wasn't emotionally ready for that conversation. I needed time to strengthen my resolve to prepare myself for the accusations and emotional manipulation that would surely follow. Before turning off my phone, I left a single voicemail for Amanda. "Amanda, this is your mother. I want you to know that I have canceled any additional financial support for your wedding. The $25,000 I already contributed will have to be sufficient. I've also removed all of you as authorized users on my accounts. This isn't done out of anger or a desire to punish you. It's because I've realized that allowing you to treat me this way, while continuing to use my money for a celebration I'm not welcome at, is unhealthy for all of us. I love you. I would have given anything to see you walk down the aisle. But I will not be treated as if I'm good enough to pay for your wedding, but not good enough to attend it. When you're ready to talk about this with honesty and respect, I'll be here." The next day, I drove to my sister Teresa's house in Arizona. I needed to be somewhere else when they discovered what I had done, somewhere I could process my emotions without the immediate pressure of their reactions. Teresa welcomed me with open arms, asking no questions beyond, "Are you okay?" when she saw my face. "I will be," I told her, and for the first time since Amanda's phone call, I believed it might be true. I spent 5 days with Teresa, explaining everything that had happened, crying on her shoulder, and slowly beginning to rebuild my sense of self-worth. My sister was furious on my behalf, but also proud of me for standing up for myself. Frank would be proud too, she told me one evening, as we sat on her porch watching the sunset. He never would have tolerated the children treating you this way. Catherine says, I wasn't enough. After he died, I said quietly, that I was barely adequate as a mother. Teresa snorted. That girl has a selective memory. You were a superhero, Josephina, working multiple jobs, never complaining, putting them first in everything. If Catherine thinks that's barely adequate, then her standards are impossible. Gradually, I began to see the truth in Teresa's words. I had done my absolute best for my children. I had given them love, stability, and opportunities, despite overwhelming circumstances. If they couldn't see that, it reflected on them, not on me. On the 5th day, I decided it was time to go home and face whatever came next. The wedding was now only a week away. My bank had confirmed that all the additional charges had been declined, and my accounts were secure. I had received numerous voicemails and texts from all 3 children before I blocked them, ranging from confusion to anger to outright threats. As Teresa helped me pack my small suitcase, she asked, "What will you do on the actual wedding day?" I had thought about this question extensively. I'm going to volunteer at the community center, I said. They're having a special lunch program for seniors that Saturday. Being of service to others will help me get through the day. Teresa hugged me tightly. You're the strongest woman I know, Josephina. Don't ever forget that. Driving home, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. I was grieving the wedding. I wouldn't see the daughter. I wouldn't walk down the aisle with the family moments that should have been. But I also felt freed from a pattern of diminishment that had been growing for years, a slow erosion of my place in my children's lives that had culminated in this painful exclusion. For the first time in decades, I was putting myself first, not out of selfishness, but out of self-respect. And despite the pain, it felt right. I returned to a house full of messages. My answering machine was blinking furiously, and when I finally unblocked my children's numbers, my phone immediately began buzzing with text notifications. Most were from Catherine, her messages growing increasingly angry. What do you think you're doing the earliest one, Reed? Answer your phone right now, demanded another. The most recent sent just that morning. You've ruined everything. I hope you're satisfied. There were fewer messages from Michael, mostly variations of, Mom, we need to talk, and you're making this worse than it needs to be. From Amanda, there were tearful voicemails. Mom, please call me back. The caterer says our final payment was declined. The wedding is in 6 days. Please don't do this. I listened to them all, steeling myself against the manipulation in their voices. Then I deleted them. They had made their decision about my role in this wedding. Now I had made mine. Through social media posts that friends sent me, I had temporarily deactivated my own accounts to give myself peace. I learned that the wedding was being hastily downsized. The guest list had been cut by nearly half. The venue remained the same, but many of the extravagant additions Catherine had planned, champagne fountains, ice sculptures, luxury party favors, were eliminated. Catherine posted a passive-aggressive update that didn't name me but made her feelings clear. Sometimes the people who should support you the most are the ones who let you down when it really counts. But we're going to make this beautiful day happen, despite the obstacles. The comments were full of sympathetic responses, people assuming some vendor had fallen through or costs had unexpectedly increased. No one seemed to know the real story, or if they did, they weren't saying it publicly. The day of the wedding arrived. As planned, I spent it volunteering at the local community center serving lunch to elderly residents and engaging them in conversation and board games afterward. Many were alone, their own children distant or gone. We understood each other. "You're not usually here on Saturdays," noted Gloria, a regular at the center who had become a friend. "No big plans today." "This is exactly where I need to be," I told her, and meant it. That evening, I came home to an empty house. I made myself a simple dinner and watched an old movie, trying not to think about the celebration happening across town, the daughter in a white dress. The moment a father would typically walk her down the aisle, or a mother would adjust her veil one last time. From what I gathered later through mutual friends, the wedding proceeded as a significantly scaled-back version of Catherine's grand vision. Amanda walked herself down the aisle. The reception was shorter than planned, the meal simpler, but they were married, and that was what mattered. I expected to hear from them in the days immediately following the wedding, but there was silence. According to social media, Amanda and Brian left for a short honeymoon at a nearby beach resort. Catherine posted pointed comments about moving forward after disappointments, but made no direct contact. It was a full week after the wedding when the confrontation finally came. I was in my garden, pruning my roses, when a car pulled into my driveway, then another, and a third. All three of my children had arrived together, clearly planned in advance. Catherine led the charge up my walkway, her face set in hard lines. Michael followed, looking uncomfortable but determined. Amanda came last, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. I set down my gardening shears and straightened up, suddenly conscious of my dirty jeans and t-shirt, my hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. But I refused to feel inadequate. This was my home, my garden, my life. I would not be diminished here. "Hello," I said calmly. "I see you've all decided to visit at once." "Don't act like this is a normal social call," Catherine snapped. "You know exactly why we're here." "Why don't we go inside?" I suggested, removing my gardening gloves. "The neighbors don't need to hear family business." Once in my living room, the storm broke. Catherine paced back and forth, too angry to sit down. "How could you do this?" she demanded. "Do you have any idea what you did to Amanda's wedding, to her special day?" I declined to pay for additional expenses for an event I was explicitly told I wasn't welcome to attend. I replied, keeping my voice level, "I'd say that's perfectly reasonable." "You promised that money," Catherine continued. "You can't just change your mind at the last minute because your feelings were hurt." I paid $25,000, which was what I originally offered. The additional expenses you all kept adding were never agreed to by me. "We had to cut the guest list in half," Michael interjected. People who had already RSVP'd had to be told they couldn't come anymore. It was humiliating. "More humiliating than being told you're not welcome at your own daughter's wedding?" I asked, looking directly at him. "More humiliating than having your parenting described as barely adequate after you worked 3 jobs to keep your children fed and housed. Michael at least had the grace to look away. Amanda spoke up, her voice breaking. "Mom, it was my wedding day. The most important day of my life. How could you punish me like that?" Her words stung, but I held firm. "Amanda, sweetheart, I would have given anything to be at your wedding, to help you get ready to see you walk down the aisle to celebrate with you. That's all I wanted. You chose to exclude me, but still expected me to pay for an increasingly extravagant event. Can you really not see why that was wrong?" "Catherine said it would be better that way," Amanda said, glancing at her sister. "She said you wouldn't feel comfortable with all those people, that it was a kindness to not put you in that position. And did you believe that I asked quietly? Or did you just go along with it because it was easier than standing up to your sister?" Amanda didn't answer, but her eyes filled with fresh tears. Catherine was not so easily subdued. "This isn't just about the wedding anymore," she said coldly. "You've changed your will, too." The lawyer's office called to verify some information and mentioned the amendments. I hadn't expected them to discover that so quickly. "Yes, I made some changes. You're all still my beneficiaries, but I've added some protections for myself." "Protections from your own children." Catherine's voice dripped with disdain. "Do you really think we're after your money? Your house isn't worth that much, and your savings are a pittance compared to what Thomas and I make in a year." Her casual cruelty took my breath away. "Then why are you so concerned about my will?" "Because it's the principle," she shot back. "You're treating us like we can't be trusted, like we're somehow a threat to you." "Aren't you?" I asked simply. "You've rewritten our family history to cast me as an inadequate mother. You've turned family members against me with lies. You excluded me from my daughter's wedding while still expecting me to fund it. What would you call that behavior?" "I call it seeing things as they really are," Catherine said. "You've always played the martyr, Mom. Poor Josephina working so hard, sacrificing so much. But guess what? That's what parents are supposed to do. You don't get a medal for fulfilling your basic responsibilities." "And children are supposed to respect their parents," I replied. "Not just when it's convenient or when they want something." The argument continued in circles, with Catherine growing increasingly venomous, Michael occasionally trying to play peacemaker while still supporting his sisters, and Amanda crying silently. It became clear that they had come with one purpose: to make me feel guilty enough to apologize and reinstate the financial support I had withdrawn. "I want you to understand something," I said finally, when there was a brief lull in Catherine's tirade. "I don't regret canceling those payments. I don't regret changing my will. What I regret is that it took me this long to realize how little respect you have for me." "So that's it," Catherine said. "You're choosing money over your relationship with your children." "No, Catherine. I'm choosing self-respect. There's a difference." "Well, I hope you enjoy your self-respect when you're alone in your old age," she shot back. "Don't expect to be included in our lives after this. Don't expect to meet any future grandchildren." That threat cut deep, but I refused to show it. "That would be your choice, just as this was mine." "I can't believe how selfish you're being," Michael added, shaking his head. "After everything, you're putting money above family." "This isn't about money," I said wearily. "It's about being treated with basic human dignity, something you all seem to have forgotten." Amanda finally spoke again, her voice small. "You ruined my wedding day, Mom. It was supposed to be perfect. Now it's always going to be remembered for what was missing for the last minute, changes for the embarrassment of telling people they couldn't come after all. How am I supposed to forgive that?" I looked at my youngest child, this daughter I had raised with so much love, now parroting her sister's manipulations back to me. "The question, Amanda, is, How am I supposed to forgive being told I wasn't good enough to attend my own daughter's wedding? That my accent, my clothes, my very presence would somehow diminish your special day? She had no answer for that. When they finally left after more accusations and guilt trips had failed to change my position, Catherine's parting shot was, "Don't call us when you need something. You've made your choice." I watched their cars pull away 3 separate vehicles heading in the same direction. They were united in their anger toward me, if nothing else, and I was alone. But as I closed my front door and leaned against it, I realized that I had been alone for much longer than I had admitted to myself. My children had been pulling away for years, treating me with decreasing respect and consideration. This confrontation had merely brought it into the open. And painful as it was, there was a certain relief in finally seeing the truth clearly. The weeks following the confrontation were some of the loneliest of my life. The house felt too quiet, the hours too empty. I would catch myself reaching for the phone to call Amanda or Michael before remembering that they weren't speaking to me. Several times I questioned my decision. Had I overreacted? Should I have just accepted my diminished place in their lives, grateful for whatever scraps of attention they were willing to give me? But each time these doubts surfaced, I would remember Catherine's cold voice saying my parenting was barely adequate. I would remember Amanda's tearful accusation that I had ruined her wedding day, with no acknowledgement that excluding her mother might have ruined it first. I would remember Michael's passive acceptance of it all, his unwillingness to stand up for me even once. And I knew I had made the right choice. Difficult, painful, but right. My sister Teresa called daily a lifeline of support and love. "How are you holding up?" she would ask, and I would tell her the truth, whether good or bad that day. My friend Dolores brought casseroles and companionship, sitting with me through evenings when the silence grew too heavy. "They'll come around," she insisted. "Maybe not, Catherine. She's too much like your mother-in-law. That woman never admitted she was wrong a day in her life. But the others will. Give them time." I wasn't so sure. The depth of their anger had shocked me. It seemed they truly believed I was the one at fault for withdrawing financial support, not that they were wrong for excluding me in the first place. I threw myself into activities to fill the void. I volunteered more regularly at the community center. I joined a book club at the local library. I took a watercolor class at the senior center, something I had always wanted to try but never found time for when I was working and raising children. The simple act of putting brush to paper, of creating something colorful and imperfect but uniquely mine, became a form of therapy. About 3 weeks after the confrontation, I received a letter. Not an email or a text, a physical letter handwritten on nice stationery. It was from Brian, Amanda's new husband. "Dear Mrs. Martinez," it began formally, "I'm writing to tell you that I do not agree with how you were treated regarding our wedding. I tried to convince Amanda that excluding you was wrong, but I failed to be persuasive enough. That's my failure as much as hers. While I understand your decision to withdraw financial support given the circumstances, I want you to know that I valued your contribution and would have been proud to have you present on our day. I hope that in time, healing can occur in your family. Until then, please know that not everyone agrees with how things were handled. Respectfully, Brian." The letter brought tears to my eyes. This young man who I barely knew had shown more respect for me than my own children. I tucked the letter away carefully, a small beacon of hope in the darkness. As summer turned to fall, I began building a new life for myself. I joined a walking group that met 3 mornings a week in the local park. Through them I met Louisa, a retired nurse whose children lived overseas. We began having coffee together after walks, sharing stories of our lives and finding common ground in our experiences as mothers whose children had moved beyond needing them. The hardest part of motherhood, Louisa told me one day, is accepting that you raise children to leave you, but you don't raise them to disrespect you. There's a difference. Her words resonated deeply with me. Yes, I had always known my children would build their own lives, separate from mine. But I had never imagined they would decide I was an embarrassment, someone to be hidden away and excluded from important family moments. In October, 6 months after the wedding, my doorbell rang on a Sunday afternoon. I opened it to find Amanda standing there alone, her eyes red from crying, looking younger and more vulnerable than she had in years. "Mom?" she said simply, and then burst into tears. I opened my arms and she fell into them, sobbing against my shoulder like she used to do as a little girl. I led her inside and we sat together on the couch, her tears gradually subsiding into hiccuping breaths. "I'm so sorry," she said finally. "I don't even know where to begin." "Just begin," I told her gently. "I'm listening." The story came out haltingly. She and Brian had been having problems since the wedding. He had never approved of my exclusion and had been increasingly vocal about his disappointment in how she had allowed Catherine to influence her decisions. They had argued about it repeatedly, with Brian insisting that Amanda needed to make amends. But it wasn't just Brian, Amanda admitted. I knew it was wrong. I knew it the minute we had that phone call. But Catherine was so convinced it was the right thing to do, and she had taken over so much of the planning. I felt trapped. And then, when you canceled the additional funding, I was angry because it confirmed what Catherine had been saying, that you would make the wedding about you. "The wedding was already about me," I pointed out quietly. "About excluding me." She nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I see that now. I'm so ashamed, Mom. How could I have done that to you after everything you've done for us?" We talked for hours that afternoon, really talked in a way we hadn't in years. Amanda admitted that Catherine had been systematically undermining my place in their lives for a long time, subtly at first and then more openly. She had characterized my hard-working years as neglect my sacrifices, as manipulative martyrdom my love, as controlling and outdated. She has this way of making her version of reality seem like the only possible truth, Amanda explained. And she's been so successful, so polished, it was easier to believe her than to question her. "And Michael?" I asked. Amanda sighed. "Michael goes along with whatever keeps the peace. You know how he's always been. But he's not happy either. Diane has been telling him he was wrong to support Catherine on this." I wasn't ready to fully forgive Amanda that day. The hurt was still too fresh, the betrayal too deep. But it was a beginning, a crack in the wall that had formed between us. I told her I needed time, that trust once broken takes time to rebuild. She accepted this with a maturity that surprised me. "I'll wait," she said as she was leaving, "however long it takes. And Mom, Brian and I want you to know, I'm pregnant, due in April. We want our child to know their grandmother." The news hit me like a physical wave, joy and anxiety and lingering hurt all mixed together. A grandchild, a new life, a new beginning. April is a beautiful month for a baby, was all I could manage to say. After Amanda's visit, things began to shift slowly. Michael called a week later, awkward and hesitant. "Amanda said she talked to you," he began. "She did," I confirmed, not making it easier for him. "I should have stood up for you," he said finally. "I always just go along with Catherine because it's easier. But it wasn't right what happened with the wedding. I know that." It wasn't a full apology, but it was something, a recognition at least that wrongs had been done. We agreed to meet for lunch the following weekend, a first step toward rebuilding our relationship. Catherine remained estranged. According to Amanda, she was furious that her siblings had capitulated and saw their reconnection with me as a personal betrayal. She maintained that she had done nothing wrong, that she had only been trying to create the perfect wedding for Amanda and protect me from feeling out of place in a sophisticated setting. Her continued justifications only confirmed for me that I had made the right decision in standing up for myself. The Catherine I had raised had somewhere along the way become someone who could treat her mother with calculated cruelty and see nothing wrong with it. That was a painful reality to accept, but one I needed to face. As the months passed, my relationship with Amanda and Michael gradually improved. There were still awkward moments, still times when the hurt would resurface unexpectedly. But we were talking again, rebuilding on a foundation of honesty rather than obligation. Amanda's pregnancy progressed, and she began including me in her preparations for the baby. We went shopping for nursery items together. She asked my advice about names, small steps, but meaningful ones. When April arrived, and with it my first grandchild, a beautiful baby girl they named Sophia, the circle of life seemed to offer a new chance at family bonds. Holding that tiny infant in my arms, I felt both the weight of the past and the possibility of the future. Catherine did not come to the hospital when Sophia was born. Her absence was a shadow on what should have been an unclouded joy. But I had learned to accept what I could not change. Perhaps someday she would find her way back to us. Perhaps not. I had to make peace with that uncertainty. As spring turned to summer again, a full year after the wedding that had fractured our family, I reflected on what I had learned through this painful journey. I had learned that being a mother did not mean sacrificing my dignity or accepting disrespect. I had learned that love without boundaries is not really love at all, but a recipe for resentment and pain. I had learned that standing up for myself, while difficult, was essential to my own healing. Most importantly, I had learned that family relationships, like all relationships, must be built on mutual respect. The parent-child bond is sacred, yes, but it is not a blank check for mistreatment on either side. Today, as I rock my granddaughter in the same chair where I once rocked her mother, I feel a sense of peace that was hard-won but genuine. My life is not perfect. One child remains estranged. The others and I are still carefully rebuilding what was broken, but I am whole, in a way I wasn't before defined, not just by what I give to others, but by the respect I require for myself. If you're watching this and struggling with similar family pain, know that you are not alone. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean you don't love your family. It means you understand that true love requires respect on both sides. Remember that it's never too late to set boundaries, to demand dignity, to create a life that honors both your relationships and yourself. What boundaries have you had to set with loved ones? How did it change your relationships? Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if you found my story meaningful, consider subscribing for more reflections on family healing and self-respect. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength on your own path to setting healthy boundaries with those you love most.